Hello and welcome to Hammer the Backlog, the Warhammer mini painting productivity and accountability blog. My name is Mick, I am the one who hammers the backlog, and over the last 3 months I've been applying productivity and accountability methods to help me to paint more miniatures. And in the last 3 months, the miniatures I've mostly been painting are dogs of war. If you've been watching Hammer the Backlog for the last few videos, you know that once a year I sit down and I set out a year's worth of targets of things that I want to get painted. Then, once every 3 months, once per quarter, I sit down again, check the progress of the previous quarter and look at the next quarter and set more targets. So that's what we're doing today. This is the Q1 target review and the Q2 target setting session for the second year of Hammer the Backlog. In Q1 I had 2 main targets. As with every other quarter, I like to have a painting target and a, what I call, meta target. The painting target was quite simple. It was to get most of my original 1998 mostly metal Dogs of War army painted to a decent standard. The second target was to film, edit and upload my first ever games of Warhammer Fantasy 5th edition. As you can see before you, for the 5th quarter in a row, all of the rocks were achieved. All of the Dogs of War have been painted to a standard that I'm happy with. Rory the dragon, who you can see here, is a little bit of a cheat. Rory was one of my first plastic models. Wait a minute, he's not really called Rory, he's called Asarnil the Dragon Lord on Death Fang, but I call him Rory. Rory was one of my first ever models and way too big a project for young Mick. But 2 or 3 years ago, just before I started the Hammer the Backlog project, I dragged him out of storage, fixed him up and painted him to a standard that made me smile. And in a lot of ways, this dragon is responsible for this whole project getting started. Pizarro's Lost Legion were a set of models that I bought as a teenager in 1998 without any of the skills or knowledge to paint properly. The box art on the originals was quite dark, with deep bronze armor and brown overcoats. And I decided to go for something a little bit lighter. I wanted more of a steel look for the metal and a lighter cotton look for the overcoats. Lumpenkrupp's Fighting Cocks never really got finished back in 1998. I started them, amazingly, without even putting an undercoat on. The challenging thing for me with these guys was painting their naturalistic colours: greens, browns, oranges and tans. The next model to get painted was the Mercenary General. This guy is a really cool model, but he is the closest thing Games Workshop have ever released to a model called Generic Man on Horse. Leopold's Leopard Company were next. These models are some of my favourite models of all time. In fact, I love them so much, this is my 3rd time painting this same set of models. Hopefully, also the last. They don't need to be stripped again. I'm happy with them now. The last models to be painted for the Dogs of War were Bronzino and his famous Galloper gun. I was particularly excited to paint these guys, but in the end didn't love them as much as I hoped I would. I think I've learned about myself over the last few weeks that when it comes to painting, I like painting little men, little soldiers and monsters. Things like buildings, war machines, lots of armour don't really appeal to me quite as much. Having said that, they did turn out pretty cool. So that's the Dogs of War finish, and me very happy with the progress on those. I do have a few more Dogs of War in a box of shame somewhere. Maybe not a substantial army like this, but a couple of models, maybe some ogres, the birdmen. Definitely not enough for a whole quarter, but maybe a future bits and bobs project. The second rock, the second target for this quarter was the meta target. The meta target was to get the Wrath of Tlaxclan battle report filmed, uploaded and edited. In order to get that battle report filmed though, there had to be some painting. The Warhammer Fantasy 5th edition starter set is so unbalanced in favour of the Bretonnians that even in the starter set game, which wasn't published in the starter set, it was published separately in White Dwarf, but even in the starter set game, the designers had to beef up the lizardmen side a little bit. So all of the lizardmen got command groups. The lizardmen command groups in the 90s were all metal. There were no plastic options. So I had to do a little bit of hunting, including calling on some friends and a little bit of eBaying to get the rest of the lizards. These guys were a joy to paint up. I got them done early in the quarter so that I could then move on and play the battle report, film it, edit it and upload it. They really bring a lovely little splash of colour to the whole thing. So that's it for the quarter one rock review. Overall, another very successful quarter. Very, very happy with the Dogs of War, very happy with the Lizardmen. The Wrath of Tlaxclan battle report was uploaded just about on time and is available at the link down below in the description. So overall, a very nice quarter. So now it's time for me to clear the table of quarter one's models and bring out the next 3 quarters worth of models to start thinking about the rocks and targets for quarter 2 of year 2. So let's start quarter 2 of year 2 as we start every quarter of every year in the Hammer the Backlog project. If you've seen any of the previous videos, you know that I like to divide my year's worth of models out into trays. Each of these trays represents about 3 months of work for me with my painting speed and my painting standard. For you, a tray like this could be a weekend. For you, a tray like this could be a year. But this is all about how much I can get painted to a standard that I'm happy with in the time that I have. So we have 3 trays in front of us. All 3 trays relate to the overall yearly target. We have here on the left the Dark Angels Space Marines from the Dark Vengeance box set. On the right we have the Chaos Space Marines and Chaos Cultists from the Dark Vengeance box set, and the Orc team from the Blood Bowl 2nd edition starter set. And at the front here we have my 3D printed resin Chaos Dwarfs and the human team from the 2nd edition Blood Bowl. So, bearing in mind that each of them represents 3 months of work, the question is, do we go from fantasy to science fiction, or do we stay with fantasy? And if you know anything about me, and if you know anything about Hammer the Backlog, you know I've already made up my mind, and this quarter's target is going to be, number 1, get my 3D printed resin Chaos Dwarf army painted, photographed and online. Number 2, get my human Blood Bowl 2nd edition starter team painted, photographed and online. I am really excited about getting started on these guys. They're really interesting in that they are the most recent additions to the backlog. They are the newest things that I own. They are all resin, beautifully detailed, beautifully sculpted models by a sculptor called Fablzel. I'm obsessed with them. I absolutely love these models and I cannot wait to get started on them. One of the big challenges of these guys is going to be the material. I'm not used to working with resin as I am with plastic and metal. The resin is incredible. It holds a shape incredibly well. It's easy to work with. It's detailed. It's really, really nice. The only problem is it's quite brittle. In fact, not only is it brittle, but breakages are very hard to fix. I even had a little bit of a breakage on the way here. So I'm sure over the next 3 months, learning to work with this resin is going to be a big part of the challenge. I'm really excited to get started on my Blood Bowl team as well. They're going to be painted in a very, very old school style with traditional goblin green flat bases. So that's the painting rocks for the quarter, but fly. So that's the painting rocks for the quarter, but if you know Hammer the Backlog, you know I also like to have a meta rock. In the last quarter, I learned that trying to upload 3 videos per quarter was too much work for me. It really ate into my painting time and really pushed me on deadlines and was, to be honest, a little bit stressful. So I'm going to ease off on video production. I'm going to limit myself to 2 videos per quarter. Having said that, there are other aspects of Hammer the Backlog that also need some improvement. In particular, I think that the main blog, the core purpose of Hammer the Backlog, blogging weekly updates to show the progress on the models and the accountability and productivity, the blog itself is pretty bare bones and basic. I've been looking at the website and I've noticed it's very hard to search, it's not easy to find categories, it's not easy to sort, and also it's a little bit plain stylistically. I'd like it to be a little bit more evocative of the time period that we're talking about, this classic Warhammer period. So the meta rock for quarter 2 of year 2 is to update the Hammer the Backlog website with a search function, categories, and better graphics. Well, thank you very much for watching this quarter 2, year 2 planning session. That's right. Thank you very much for watching this. I absolutely love these. The biggest joy for me about the entire Hammer the Backlog project is going back into the stash and seeing what's next. It makes digging out old models or even digging out relatively recent models, it makes it feel like going to the shop and buying a new project. Why would I need to go to the shop and buy a new project when I've got 25 years worth of projects in my garage? If this is something that interested you, I love hearing about other people adopting this methodology. I know that the Hammer the Backlog method is now responsible for getting more than a few Warhammer Fantasy and 40k models and armies on the table that otherwise would be still in a box somewhere, and that just fills me with joy. If you would like to follow along with this project, if you would like to make a commitment of your own, I would love to hear it. If that's something that sounds interesting, comment down below with what your pile of shame contains and what project you're going to commit to for the next 3 months. Hammer the Backlog is updated every week at www.hammerthebacklog.com. Hammer the Backlog is also on Instagram at hammer_the_backlog. On Instagram, I only post pictures of the minis. There's none of this accountability stuff. So if all you want is the pretty pictures, that's the best place to find me. As I said, the Wrath of Tlaxcalan battle report was a lot of work this quarter. I've linked it down below. I'd love, if you enjoyed this, for you to give it a look and maybe a like. Thanks for watching all of this, though. You must be a very good egg if you've made it this far. Bye-bye.